how is SolBridge playing a role in the regionalization of Asian nations?
Well, first thing I think I should stress is the nature of our enrollment. Of course, we have now about 400 students that come from all over Asia. 60% come from China, and actually 300 would be undergraduate and 100 would be graduate. But of those students, we have the next large group would be Koreans, the next large group would be Russians, and of course Vietnamese and Bangladeshi and Pakistanis. Down at the bottom of the list, actually, is, as far as numbers of students, would be Japan. The United States is also, but that's not part of the region. But we hope to get very major participation from the United States. But we've just begun really sort of marketing our program to high schools in the United States, in sort of the southeast United States. And we hope to get some bachelor students, because we'd like to see some four-year students come from the United States. We had one, but that was a master's level. And so I'm really, I think when I talk about regionalization and our role, we're actually building new ambassadors throughout the region. They are building personal networks that will turn in, hopefully, to corporate networks, maybe government networks in the future, from basically all the countries now in Northeast Asia except North Korea. And of course, that's another one of our major issues here, because we now host the Secretariat of the Limited Nuclear Weapons Free Zone. And that particular organization, or really concept, is to try to bring some sort of security infrastructure to Northeast Asia that sort of mirror images, but uniquely is different than what we see in Europe. And so there's all this activity, I think, goes into what I call the creation of Neighborhood Asia. And Neighborhood Asia's concept is to have dynamic commercial, political, social relations between the countries of Northeast Asia, and foster those as best we can.
Do you see those as a European community model or not?
Well, Asia is, of course, uniquely different. In the sense, it's not that uniquely different. I mean, the history of conflict among the nations of Northeast Asia is much more recent than, of course, in Europe. But at one time, the French and the British were at each other's throats every year almost. And so these are the things that have to be dealt with very, very aggressively, hopefully, peacefully though. And the idea is to really teach as much as we can a history of the region that's impartial and as close to the fact as we can get away with. For example, I teach a course on what we call the peace dividend in Northeast Asia, specifically looking at the Korean Peninsula. And of course, that's very difficult, because when I teach about, there are three historic kingdoms of Korea: Koguryo, Shira, and Paekje, and we happen to be in the Paekje region here. Well, when I talk about that particular era, and I'm speaking to, say, my Chinese students at this moment, they'll raise their hands and, Dr. Endicott, don't you realize that Koguryo is actually Chinese kingdom, was not a Korean kingdom? And so there's some basic, disagreements on the fundamentals of the history out here that still have to be resolved. And between 2002, this is very unnerving actually, between 2002 and 2007, there was a very major state-supported project called the Northeast Project, done by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and supported by the Beijing government, basically to create the academic justification to make that claim that Koguryo is Chinese. And of course, that has very disturbing sort of geopolitical overtones, because that means that if the North Korean government implodes and there's a void or a vacuum out there, the Chinese could use their military to come in and reimpose order, but also under the banner of regaining territory that was China's historically. And so this is something that we have to be very cautious about.
In your student body, how are these political fissures interfering with their social development and their friendship?
It's very interesting because they're kids and sort of social relationships are more important than anything else. But you see a high degree of sensitivity. When we get to the subject of Koryo, for example, on briefings, etc., they'll play down what's going on. When we get to the issue of the comfort women and those kinds of issues with Japan that still have not been really rectified, you get a very sort of delicate sensitivity where the rest of the class will know that there's a Japanese student or two sitting in the class, and so they'll say, you know, this is an issue that's very sensitive and still being looked at in diplomatic circles, etc. And so they'll pull their punches a little bit. And in a sense, that's the, you know, sensitivity and understanding is the first step toward appreciation of the other person's issue.